Marhaba, Maya.
Marhaban.
Thank you for joining us at the CAS.
Thank you for having me.
So, Maya, your first album, Syrian Dreams, came out in 2018, and your new album, Finding Home, is released this month. And first off, tell us about the qanun, the instrument that you play in both of the albums.
Sure. So the qanun, it literally translates as law, principle. And it's just because it has 78 strings. So if you are in a traditional band, which is called a taht, then everybody will tune according to the pitch of the qanun. So in so many ways, it's sort of considered to be the piano of the Arab world. As you can see, it has a very big range. To me, it has like the etheric, lovely range, but also it has the dark, intense, really percussive, really bassy range. So it's melodically, it's incredibly rich. And there's a lovely story about it, that it possesses a magical, spirit. And that story basically was found in the stories of 1001 Nights, where Al-Farabi, the person who gave it its shape and increased the number of strings in it, wanted to test how magic it was. So he took it to a gathering and he played something very joyful. So everybody started dancing. Then he played something really sad. So everybody started weeping. And then he played something very mellow that made everybody yawn and fall asleep. And then he left. So it's very much connected to magic and to the emotions in the old lore.
Wow, it's an incredible instrument. How did it come into your life? How did you discover the qanun?
Basically, I started learning music when I was 6, and for 2 years you have to study solfeggio, music theory, and then when you're 8, there is the big moment where you're supposed to pick one musical instrument. So my parents suggested the violin, which I have reluctantly accepted. And then one day my mum was taking me to the Institute of Music on a hot summer's day in Damascus. And the taxi driver turned the radio on, and there came the sound of the qanun. You know, it was like a warm waft of air and just filled my heart. And I shouted, I was just 8, but I told him, "What is this instrument, Ammo?" Means uncle. And he said, "Oh, this is the qanun, but you're a girl. This instrument is for men." And he laughed at me. And I said, "I will play it. You will see." My mum just shrugged her shoulders. She just didn't give much weight to the conversation. I walk into the class, and my mum reads her book outside. And there walks in the head of the institute, announcing the opening of a new class. It was a qanun class. And he said, "Anybody interested, come and sign up after this session is over." So I ran. I was at the top of the queue, and my mother was completely astonished. But because I had the most amazing parents on earth, I had that lovely violin returned, and I had a qanun, which was literally 5 times my size, waiting for me on the table after school. So that's how it started.
Wow. Gosh, and you've been called the queen of the qanun now. So I think you've proven that it's not a men's instrument.
Hopefully, I'd like to think that. Yeah, but still, we are such a small minority, when it comes to the number of women playing it, it's still, we are like 3-4% if I'm optimistic.
Right. No. Okay. And are there different types or sizes of qanun?
Yes. So you have the Arabic qanun, which the main difference is really in size and in number of levers. So, and you have the Turkish qanun. Turkish qanun is slightly smaller, but it has 9 levers per note. So this is really to reflect the maqam theory. So in Arabic music, the tone is divided into 4 quarters. In Turkish music, you have 9 commas. So you need more levers to translate that. And you have an Azeri qanun, which is roughly the same size as the Arabic qanun, but it has 2 levers only. So it's the main difference is in the number and the shape of levers, but they're all called qanun.
Right, interesting. I think the best way to get a flavor and understanding of it is to just play a short extract from the first piece on your new album, An Invitation to Daydream. So let's just listen to that for a minute. I could listen to that all day.
Thank you.
If only all my daydreams could be that captivating, really. Where did you, when you're composing a piece like that, where do you go for inspiration? Do you have a sense of where the music coming from when you're writing it?
Yes, so this piece, for instance, is commissioned by the British Museum. So I knew that it was so much fun to go to the museum when everything was shut, and I had a private tour of the exhibition Reflections, because I had to choose works of art that will inspire me. So so this was inspired by a painting, really, by a contemporary famous French Lebanese painter, Huguette Galland. But yeah, it's so that's the logical side. But the place from which the music is born is always comes after prayers, after meditation. It's not the logical brain. It's really tapping into the source of everything, because that's what I pray for before I compose. I pray that my music brings in peace in any way. And then I just listen and go with whatever comes out, even though sometimes whatever comes out is very surprising. Like, really, I've never been to this, this is very interesting. But I learned to listen to the muse and go with her.
And yeah, so you've alluded to this already. How does your music making, your composition relate to the traditions of music making in Syria and the Arabic world?
You have to be rooted in your tradition before you can experiment. You have to have a very solid knowledge of the maqam system, which is the modal system of the Arab world, and the taqasim system, how to improvise, which is really musical storytelling. So without having that root, without being classically trained in the tradition, you cannot really experiment. You need to know the rules before you can break them. And I'm incredibly lucky, just to have a music tradition that goes back to thousands and thousands and thousands of years in me, really. And so that is the root from which I grew. And I always use the image of a tree. She's very rooted and into that tradition, but her branches can go anywhere, and experiment, and just explore new music terrains, basically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what's the relationship between composition and improvisation, in the pieces that you write?
I mean, a lot of the pieces I write have improvisation sections, and these improvisation sections never sound the same. Every time in every concert, there will be like small, sometimes they're completely different ways and this is really goes back to how Arabic music is performed. If you play one piece, you as a performer need to perform it in infinite number of ways, which is completely different to the mindset of classical music, where you have to basically perform things as written. So improvisation and ornamenting and adding of yourself to a musical piece is so much at the heart of Arabic music, really.
Absolutely. And on the album, you collaborated with a number of other musicians and instrumentalists. Who were they?
Oh my gosh, I had the dream team, honestly. I'm so grateful to each one of them. So I had Al McSween on piano. He's phenomenal. He's just, all the musicians that I basically performed with are not from Syria or not even from the Arab world, they're just from everywhere, but they have such a beautiful musical expression, which is something that I'm trying to tap into with this album, just like, grow up into different terrains. And I had Michaela Montoli, amazing double bassist. I don't know why I didn't work with double bass before. It's literally is one of my favorite instruments. Absolutely amazing. I had my very old collaborator, Elizabeth, not on percussion, phenomenal musician. She's the first musician I ever collaborated with in the UK. So we have been friends since such a long time. So it was so lovely to have her on this album. We had Shirley Smart on cello. Again, she's my good friend and old collaborator. And then we had a quartet, phenomenal quartet from Opera North Orchestra. So part of this album was just basically rallying the support of people who wanted to see it happen. So I was so grateful to the Opera North for providing these phenomenal musicians. They featured on 3 tracks. And then I had Hamza Munif voice featuring on 1 track in My Mother's Sweet Embrace. And finally, I had my co-producer Leo Abraham featuring on 2 tracks. So on guitar, ambient guitar, which sounds like a choir. It's so cool. It's truly, they're absolutely amazing as humans and absolutely exceptional in their craft.
Absolutely, and just having that ensemble of musicians from different backgrounds and traditions, did that have an influence, do you think, on the
Yes, yeah, totally. It's definitely opened it up, because it's very important for me that musicians bring themselves to the music. So it totally did, so I sort of like provided the raw material, but everybody added of themselves, like Al studied Indian improvisation and he played a lot of Arabic music. So he brought a lot of like touches that don't sound classical, for instance, or Michele he plays a lot of jazz. So some of the licks that he does are very, particularly in Jasmine Bayasi. So everybody brought stuff, and even Elizabeth, she's from Venezuela, so she sometimes just grooves in a way that is from that part of the world, which I absolutely love, even though that she plays Arabic instruments, the raqqa and the daf. So yeah, it's very important for me for musicians to bringing of themselves, and that's why this album, I think, was honest, really, which is important, Yeah,
absolutely. And just to touch on the name, your first album was called Syrian Dreams. This one's called Finding Home. How did it come to get that name?
It really speaks about the shift that happened in me. Before I related with the word Syrian. Syrian is always in my heart. It's always in my blood and my bones. But now I feel my sense of self has expanded to finding home in humanity, finding home in the earth. And finding home now has shifted from being a place to becoming an emotional and spiritual state, where you feel at home, where you feel at peace, that place of softness. So that's basically the title of the album is a reflection on my journey, where my sense of home has shifted and expanded.
Absolutely. And I know you've said as you tour the album from now until June that you want to run refugee community workshops in the different places that you visit. Yes. Why was that important to you?
It's very important for me. The places that I'm playing at are all classical venues. These are not the places that you would usually find refugee communities. They perhaps find them cold and distant, and perhaps they're intimidated by them. So it's very, very important for me to break that. And I had a very clear idea that the album is my inward journey, but I wanted the project to translate in an outward way, where you can just give people a small experience of being at home, hopefully. Because I hear all the time that the sound of the Qanun is the sound of home. I get people all the time telling me that, oh my gosh, the Qanun brought me back to the memories of my loved ones, or memories of a place, or even a scent, or a deep feeling. And we often share, hugs and sometimes tears after concerts. So it's very important for me to extend that and open it up, and not, just to create these moments where we can all hopefully come together and hopefully feel at home in any way, in the smallest way, in the most humble of ways.
Yeah. I mean, the album's going to have such a ripple in so many different ways, Maya, and really recommend that everybody goes out and seeks it out and listens to it. It's really, really a remarkable album. Thank you for your time today. It's a pleasure to have you on the cusp.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.